Diane
All right.
Delaney from the Red Cross.
Okay.
Welcome.
How many folks do we have here?
I think
just
we
say-
have, there are 9 of us,
Ah, wonderful. Okay.
Anita's here too.
10 of us.
All right. All right, let me just make sure. Okay, very good. All right, so as Susan said, I'm Diane Delaney. I have been a Red Cross volunteer for about 7 years, following retiring from a career in law enforcement. So I know quite a bit about first response and responding to emergencies. I teach this class, but I also primarily teach a class on preparedness for students kindergarten through 2nd and 3 through 5. So we have a similar preparedness class for students that's really fun and to their age group. So just a quick history of the Red Cross. The Red Cross was established back in 1881 by a teacher named Clara Barton. For those of you who were maybe Girl Scouts, that's a familiar name. Clara was a teacher assisting soldiers during the Civil War, and got actually so close to battle that her blouse got grazed by a bullet. And instead of giving up and being scared, she realized that there was really a need to help people in times of disasters and emergencies, and went to the president to establish the Red Cross. So this organization is in the United States as well as worldwide. In other countries, it's often referred to as the Red Crescent, and that's a symbol that you may see in other countries when the Red Cross is doing our work. Let's see. Okay, so the mission statement of the Red Cross, and you don't have to read everything. I'm not going to read everything verbatim, but one of the really cool things about the Red Cross is that it's absolutely non-discriminatory. So the whole idea is to alleviate human suffering, and we respond to disasters, as I said, all over the world, and we don't ask questions about status, immigration status, or anything at all. If people need help, the Red Cross is there to help them. And we just try to alleviate that human suffering that we unfortunately see everywhere. This is called Be Red Cross Ready, and that's the program that I'm presenting to you today. This is perfect timing in light of the beautiful to-go bags that were provided to the village members, and that's the hardest part. So you've already gotten a great start in being prepared because you have that kit, and we're going to talk a lot about that, and I know a lot went into what to put in it and what you might add, but it's a really great start. And that's really usually the impediment, is we all have really good intentions of getting a kit, and it's really hard to just do it. So with the basis that you have, you can add things that we'll talk about make sense to you personally, other things that you might consider adding. And then that is the to-go aspect. So we also do home bags that might contain heavier things, more things. For example, if there was a chemical release at Vallejo, we might get a stay inside order where we would try to block outside air from coming into the house, in which case it would be important to have things that you need for a longer period of time. Okay, so our main thing with this is we're trying to help you get a kit, make a plan, and be informed. And like I said, you already have the basis of a kit, so that is really wonderful. All right, so disasters do happen all the time and without notice, and they can affect any community at any time. They happen without warning, which is why they're emergencies or disasters. I'm used to actually saying emergency because we're teaching students. We try to stay away from the word disaster. So they are obviously interchangeable, but I may revert to those emergencies since I'm used to that. So we do know that people get hurt, property is damaged, and systems that we rely on for help can be overwhelmed. I mean, if you think of an earthquake, another major event, so much is going on that we need to be a little bit more self-sufficient and prepared in case the system is overwhelmed. So clearly in our neck of the woods in the Bay Area, we do have a lot of home fires, unfortunately. That's one of the reasons why we worked hard to install smoke detectors and get everybody's up to speed on that. But the Red Cross responds to a home fire every 8 minutes somewhere in the US. That's a lot of fires. So we do try to talk about home fire safety. And then of course, earthquakes is something that we all need to be prepared for. And then wildfires are especially relevant in our neck of the woods. I'm going to talk about being prepared for our specific ones. So again, we try to build some self-sufficiency so that we are ready. And when we think about that, it's not just us as individuals, but our household, potentially even neighbors or others in our community and others that interact with us. We'll talk about that in a minute. But if you regularly watch grandchildren or have other friends over, we have to consider that. If you have pets, we need to consider their needs as well. So we'll go through some of those things. So it is up to us to prepare, and in the preparation, it's a lot less stressful when something actually happens because you've done some work in advance, and it will help you recover more quickly afterwards because you've been prepared and are ready to deal with what happens. So again, our program here is get a kit, make a plan, and be informed. I do have a workbook that I will get the names of the participants and probably drop them off on front porches in the next few days. This is kind of a compilation of some of the things we'll talk about, and it has some important things I'll discuss at the end that will help you help you be prepared communications-wise. So the kit itself, we talked about the go bag, which is what everybody received. And that's ideally for a minimum of 3 days to be prepared. And a larger version would be for 2 weeks. And a lot of things that you have in your bag are exactly what you need. The one thing that is not in there that may come in handy is a radio. So I would suggest a lightweight radio, either hand crank or battery operated with some extra batteries, so that in case communication systems are down, you're still able to communicate with other people. One thing we don't really think so much about, we're so dependent on our phones and all the information in them, is if that wasn't working, where would you be? So do you have emergency numbers elsewhere other than on your phone? And we do have, in the book, there's a whole sheet of these emergency contact cards, and it's really just a place to store things that you can then put in a purse, a briefcase, a backpack, so that you always have those things handwritten in case the phone is either down or not available. And also using the earthquake as a reference, for example, it might be hard to communicate between, say if we had a big earthquake here in the Bay Area, it might be harder to communicate, say, between Benicia and Vallejo or Benicia and Sacramento than it would be, say, Benicia and Texas or Mexico or anywhere where you might have friends and family. So we'll talk about the need to have the plan to have others in our communications network so that we're kind of never without the ability to communicate to people that are important. And these are some of the essentials that you have. You see it says a gallon a day of water. That includes hygiene as well as drinking water. And that's an average, and you kind of know whether that fits in with your personal habits or not. But that is the recommendation for water. Other things that you do have in your kit, first aid. We'll talk about the medications in a minute because that's really important and something we don't always consider. So you have a really good start with that. And if you do have non-perishable food items, things should be rotated about 6 months or so. If you have water even, it would be nice to rotate it. Maybe not those bars that were in your kit are really good for a long, long time. So that's a great place to start. But if you're developing a secondary kit or one for your car or a large one for home, you want to think about the perishability and how long things are going to last that you put in the kit. Make sure they're fresh. So in order to make it really beneficial for you and geared toward each of us individually, health and medical needs are super important. If you need a plug, for example, maybe oxygen or CPAP or other devices, that's something to think about. How are you going to be able to do that? And maybe that just means having those devices handy or being able to make them portable, maybe even having an extension cord that if you needed to plug it in, you wouldn't have to be stuck right in front of an outlet, things like that. And often doctors will give you extra of medications so that you can store a supply. We recommend at least 3 days, but 7 is optimum of medications. And with that should be a document that that tells you like what the medications are and what the doses are. so that if you maybe can't communicate that to someone else, that's there for someone else to see, and they know what your needs are. But having that medication is super important, because certainly if you take things every day and now you have to leave the house for 2 or 3 days, it becomes really important to have those things. And again, that should be rotated, whatever makes sense. The medication stays fresh, but they really should be in your go bag for at least 3 days. I would say separately, maybe in a Ziploc with the names of the medications and the doses, so that you know that if you just have to really get out in a hurry and grab that bag, you're going to have what you really need. And then other things like I said, pets are super important. They need care too. Do you have a carrier for a pet? Do you have a leash, a bowl, a couple bowls, enough food for the animals? If you have to leave in a hurry, you're going to obviously take your pet with you. Red Cross has a lot of. We work with partners with sheltering so that we can take care of people's animals. But generally, other than service animals, pets are not allowed inside shelters. But we do work with local agencies and humane societies, and come in and set up temporary shelters right next to our shelters, so that you can visit your animals, walk them, and we know how important our pets are to us and to our mental health. So we want to make sure that we can make sure people have that. So think about your pets and what they may need if you have to leave the house. And then comfort items. I kind of can't stress enough. I was deployed in Florida to Hurricane Irma. And initially, we just set up evacuation centers. And in that situation, because the winds were so severe, there was a cutoff point where you had to get to shelters. And the messaging wasn't really that clear. Some people came with everything they needed, and that even included people with blow-up mattresses and lawn chairs and ice chests, and really kind of a lot of things. And clothing. Other people came with just what they had on their backs. And that's really difficult because, it's cold, the comfort things that you would need, a good jacket, maybe gloves, socks, something to do, books, reading material, games, cards, things like that. Depending on your personal situation, sheltering are usually either for an evacuation situation where it really does encompass everyone. That in our area could be something like Valero. Something happened and they had to send everybody to a safer place. Now, many people have the ability to just go to family, drop a credit card at a hotel or something like that, but not everybody. So that's when we do the sheltering, and that's when it becomes important that you're kind of personally prepared in case you have to leave the house. And we talked about these couple things that you need: the grab and go, food and water, decent shoes. You don't want to get stuck with sandals or open-toed shoes in a disaster situation. It's great if you're driving to have another kit in your car. Again, if you're away from home, it's handy and it's there. And in the book is a list of supplies, and we'll talk about some of those things that go in the kit. But other than adding car specific like flares, jumper cables, things like that, the kits are pretty much the same across the board in terms of what you might need. So the planning is also really important, and knowing what you need and what your family members need. So who would be included in that planning, and then how you're going to reach each other. And we want you to take a minute to think about things like functional access. If you need assistive devices like canes or wheelchairs or walkers, it's important to have a plan to get those things with you so that you are not stuck without the things that make you comfortable and that you actually need for yourself or your family members. And again, your pets too, obviously we want to include them so that they're have what they need as well. So when we talk about evacuating, we kind of talk ways out, and you can look at the room you're in or the home you're in right now, and obviously we have front doors, back doors, sliders, but don't forget windows. You never know, especially in fire. Just look around and really evaluate, would you actually, if you really had to, be able to get out? Sometimes the answer is no, and sometimes you might be able to, but it's the thought process of identifying those places. If you had a fire, say in the front of the home, and the front door doesn't work, now where are you going to go? That back door, garage door, slider, things like that. Picking a place to meet your family is important. We often suggest a place right outside the home, by your mailbox right outside the front, and then maybe an interim place, the corner gas station, a mailbox, something that might be close to you, and then somewhere that's even further away in case you had to leave the area. But the actual communications is really important. So my example earlier of having someone out of state is pretty critical. If communications in our area are shut down, having that other person to be the liaison for the family. So it would work in a way like maybe you have a sister in Oklahoma and something happened in the Bay Area. So you would maybe call that person in Oklahoma and say, wow, we just had this great big earthquake. I was at home, I'm safe, I'm sheltering in place. And then maybe your son somewhere else would also call that person. You may not be able to get him directly, but then that person is liaison to be able to communicate between all the family members so that you don't have to contact them directly. Students at school, that's really important. College students or even other students, younger students, if they have that person out of state, they may not be able to reach you, but they can reach someone that they know will get that information to you. So think about someone out of our area that can kind of be that conduit for information. Records are really important. If you don't document what you have for insurance purposes, you may have a really hard time getting reimbursed and getting everything out of the insurance company. Recommendation is actually just video of everything, and that actually includes pulling out drawers, shelves. But if you don't document what you have, it's harder to replace. So that's a worthwhile endeavor, is to document what you have. It doesn't have to be, if you're really organized and you have receipts for everything, even better, but really it's just being able to show that, I had this, I had this exercise bike in my room, or I had these TVs, or this stereo system, or this lockbox, or this jewelry, things like that. So it's important to document your things. And then your records too. It's a good idea to keep those in two places. Even fireproof lockboxes aren't always fireproof. When it gets really hot or when there's a really significant fire, they don't necessarily last. So maybe sharing that with another family member, or a bank deposit box, or records somewhere else. Could be even in the cloud if you're trust some of the records, but you should have documentation somewhere other than the home that you can get the information that you're going to need. These are the cards that I was talking about. And in the booklet, there are a cutout of these. It's super simple. It's just obvious, putting it on old-fashioned paper and pen and putting it in a purse or wallet or something like that, so that if you do have to leave or you're away and maybe you don't have access to a phone, you have the really important information that you need. This little website called Safe and Well is something Red Cross uses in emergencies. And that's a place where family members can register themselves or those who they're looking for. And it's just kind of another communication tool so that we can hook people up that are looking for each other and want to know how their family members are, if their family members are registered. All right, so think about how you're going to get information. We talked about that radio. That could be really, really important if other things aren't working, so that you can stay in touch for instructions, as well as weather information. And then of course in Benicia and Solano County, we've got some great apps like Nixle and our Solano County alerts that go on our text or our phones that give us updated information, just like we get the every Wednesday if we heard the siren kind of thing. So there's a lot of great tools we have in our county that will help you stay informed as well. Let's see. So obviously disasters, emergency, anytime you have to leave in a hurry is stressful. And having had these plans and thinking ahead of time really can help eliminate some of the stress. Obviously, it's not going to take away the stress of the actual event, but you'll feel a lot better if you have those plans, you've given it some thought, maybe put some things to paper, and you have your kit so that you have kind of given it some thought, you're prepared, and it eases up a little bit, especially if you really think around all your family and your family's needs. If you do have children in your lives that you see often, just please think about them and their needs so that you are also planning for them in case they're with you and what they might need to help them deal with things. I think in the book, Red Cross has a lot of really great apps. You can probably, I think, just go to redcross.org and find them, but they're all phone apps for both iOS and Android. They're great. There are things like emergency first aid, pet first aid, poison things. So those are really nice and accessible, and they're all free. And those are some other things that can help you be prepared. So we did talk about what disasters we're likely to face, and the encouragement here today is just to really develop that plan and think about it. And I do want to give kudos to the village, because those to-go kits are really, really the most important step, because you now have the basis. And most people, is like I said, as good intentions as we tend to have, we don't always put those into action. So look at the kit you have, get familiar with what's in it, and then personalize it in some of the ways talked about with comfort items, medication, things that you personally will need, so that that kit is even more tailored specifically to you and your household. If you have an interest in first aid and CPR, it's a great idea if someone in the household knows. The standard now for CPR is actually just chest compressions. It's no longer, we no longer say it's necessary to do the rescue breathing and the chest compressions, because it's those compressions that'll keep the heart going. And I think most of us will probably know Staying Alive from Saturday Night Fever, but that's the beat. There are a lot of other songs, but being our age, I think that one is probably one that's well known. And if you think of the beat to Staying Alive, that is the compressions. So you can sing that while you're using the compressions. If you do have to do that, it's there's a plan that teaches you how to do the chest compressions only. It's actually fairly easy, and you can find that online. The thing is just that it's they have to go actually very deep, because compressions have to really get air into the person's chest. So you can look at a quick online about called hands only CPR, and in about 15 minutes you can probably feel pretty comfortable with what that entails and what that means for you. All right, so a couple things about home fires that I just want to go over, because I did say that these are really some of the things we have to deal with. But most of the home fires you can see are electrical problems or smoking in bed. So one of the things we remind folks is keep an eye on what you fry, because most of kitchen fires are hot oil. So never walk away from the cooktop. Turn it off if you go to answer the phone or need to run away for a minute. And make sure that any wall heaters, like it's shown here, are completely clear. You don't want to have any garments, towels, curtains, anything at all that could impede the function or could catch fire. And then of course, don't smoke in bed. It's another one. So doing these few things can really limit your susceptibility to house fires. We just talked about those things. Fire extinguishers, of course, are super important. You should have one in your kitchen for these kind of grease fires, and that is usually some kind of retardant that covers and smothers, rather than, obviously, water on oil is not going to work, so it has to be specific to your kitchen. Wall heaters, we talked about. Cords in the kitchen are important that they go directly into the wall plugs rather than using an extension cord. So for example, toasters, coffee makers, you need to do those directly without extension cords, and then making sure all those things are super clear. We talked about that. Smoke detectors, we did this program. Red Cross will, if you don't have a currently working alarm, or you need them checked, or you need new ones, we do have a program where we install them for free in homes. You know, we're kind of stalled right now because of coronavirus, but I think we could still find a way of even, maybe having the homeowner, outside and someone going in to do the installation and, making it safe. I actually helped one of our members who had a a dead battery that was super annoying, going off every 2 minutes in a place that was hard to get to. And we did that really quickly, just able to go and fix that. Make sure you test your smoke detectors. They should be tested every month or at least a couple times a year. And a lot of the new ones are good for 10 years. So it's really important. And they belong in all sleeping areas. So we obviously say bedrooms where you sleep, but if you're in the habit of falling asleep in the easy chair, then it's probably a really good idea to also have it in that room. So TV rooms, reading rooms, libraries, dens. If you have habits of falling asleep in other than your primary sleeping area, it's probably a good idea to have a smoke detector, since that's where most of the alarms save people. And one thing to note is that you only have 2 minutes to get out if there's a fire, and that's not a lot of time. But if you have thought ahead, it should be ample time. So knowing that you have that little amount of time and having talked about your 2 ways out, it's important to know where those ways are. It's also important to make sure that where you're going out is safe. So for example, if you think you might need to leave from your front door, you need to feel the door. You need to use the back of your hand and feel the doorknob, feel the door. If there's any heat at all, then obviously that's not the place to get out. So before you exit, make sure it's a safe one so that you're not going to where the fire actually is. And then staying low to the ground, since we know smoke rises. The safest air and the most the cleanest air that you're going to find is as low as you can get. And again, whatever you personally can do, you may or may not be able to actually crawl, but the lower you're able to get, the cleaner the air is going to be. And then knowing where your exits are is going to make you safer. Of course, getting out and calling 911. And this is where like that meeting place comes out, so that you're not tracking down family members. You just know that everybody's going to meet in the pre-designated location. This is just a way to talk about how to get out. There are ladders for second floors if you have 2 stories. One thing I always assure people is that when first responders come to your home, if there's any kind of fire alarm or smoke or fire, they're definitely going to go if it's visible, but they're always going to send folks around the perimeter and do a 360-degree check. And what's important about that is that if you are in an upstairs bedroom or in a room that you cannot safely exit the window or the door, you're not going to be left behind. You go to that window and signal, whether that's a whistle, whether that's yelling, whether that's a garment or something that you're waving through a window. It is important, but know that someone will respond in that 360-degree to find folks that maybe aren't able to get out on their own. And we talked about the meeting places. And it's a good idea to practice that plan, which is, just knowing that you have 2 minutes, being in different rooms and seeing if you can get out in that 2 minutes. And especially if you have other family members at home. And again, if there are children that are in your world, it's important to let them know and practice as well, and how the children would be able to get out. I always, when I'm teaching the 3rd to 5th graders, I actually tell them that now that they're that old, their parents and family members are actually expecting them to get out on their own. And that's true, because they might have other responsibilities, like younger children, infants or toddlers that can't get out on their own, or adults that might need assistance due to mobility issues. So, each family really needs to look at their own families and what they may need, and then, kind of adjust accordingly so that you have the plan for everybody. And my dog is like a toddler. Every time I get online, she starts barking. Let me shut the door 1 sec. Sasha, cool it. I defeated the gardeners, but not the dog. Okay, we talked about looking for smoke and feeling the door, and that's just common sense. But it's, again, if you've heard of it, you're going to think about doing it. And of course, it makes sense to feel it before you go. We talked about evacuating in our situation. I mentioned Valero because that is not likely, but it's there and we should be thinking about it. So if there was a release of some kind of gas or toxin or something like that, and we got a shelter in place order, you would want to seal your home the best that you could. And that could mean just towels underneath the doors to prevent air from going through, and especially from the outside in. So your front door, your back door, your windows are pretty solid, but doors not always the case. So just that extra measure of protection so that outside air doesn't get in, and your air vents. And of course, in all these emergency situations, we want to remember to call 911 and let folks know that something's going on and that we need help. So this is just encouraging you to, have that fire escape plan, test your smoke detectors to ensure that they're working, and practice that escape plan. And all these preparations just make you more safe if there's an emergency. And then of course, having those go bags that you will really have what you need in case you have to leave home or shelter in place. And let's see, briefly, earthquakes. We've all experienced them. They last anywhere from 30 seconds to 2 minutes. Always keep in mind that there are aftershocks. Once the primary event happens, be prepared for things to happen after that. The main thing in an earthquake you want to do is to protect yourself by being under something solid that would protect you from falling objects. For most homes, that's a kitchen table or a coffee table or certain types of chairs. That's not always possible. So the main thing, another thing to think about is just staying away from windows, because the breaking glass is something that you don't want to be around, and other objects like lamps and bookcases and things like that. So if you can't get under something solid, you want to be somewhere in as clear a space as you can be within your home so that falling objects don't fall on you. If you're actually in bed, an earthquake happens, we recommend you just stay there and use your pillow to gently cover your face and head so that if the lamp falls over, you've got that layer of protection. So if once you start getting up, you're unsteady and you can hurt yourself just by walking around. So we just kind of encourage you to wait it out in bed and be safe that way. If you're driving, we recommend that you pull over somewhere safe, look for things like trees, power lines, so that you don't want that to fall on the car. You want to just stop and wait it out as well. And again, if you're outside, somewhere in a large open space so that things don't fall on you. And it's a good time to remember to kind of attach bolted things to the walls that are super heavy, like armoires and bookcases and china cabinets, things like that, so that they don't prevent that hazard. A few years ago, when we had that large earthquake in Napa that happened, I think 4 or 5 in the morning when most people were sleeping, almost all the injuries that were sustained were just lacerations to people's feet because they got up and they were checking things out and looking at what was going on. So we do recommend that you keep a flashlight and some shoes. They could even be slippers with a hard sole, but something to protect your feet near the bed or right underneath the bed. And in that way, you avoid those kind of injuries. So that's something we've learned from experience. Let's see. All right, we know lots. We have earthquakes, and earthquakes. The preferred thing is drop, cover, and hold on. And the dropping part is just getting low or small underneath something solid. That's your cover, and then holding on to it. That becomes a little more relevant, say, in a school, if there's tables with wheels or you're underneath something, a rolling chair. Obviously, you don't want your protection to slide away from you. So that's the hold on part. But it's kind of an easy reminder, drop, cover, and hold on if there's an earthquake. And yep, we know what causes it. We know the damage that earthquakes do. And of course, they can trigger fires, avalanches, tsunamis, things like that. It's important to have information. And these are some things that are possibly enhancing the kits that you have. I mentioned a whistle. That's really a nice thing. I'm not sure, Judy, is there a whistle in the kit? Great. Yeah, that's really wonderful because it doesn't take much effort and it creates a lot of noise. So that's a really great thing to have. We should have we all have masks now, so it's important to make sure we have them. It's as well, since those are now becoming important to all of us. And again, just really tailoring these plans to you and your family so that you have what you need and know what to do. This we talked about inside. If you're in a wheelchair, locking the wheels and covering the back of your head and neck. And really that's just, the brain stem, the spinal cord is all connected, and that's the place we want to protect the most. So it would be just locking that so that the chair can't move, and then covering the head and neck. And we do that in all the situations, whether you're in bed or whether you're underneath something. And that's to protect what's most important. We talked about making noise and calling for help, and outdoors where you would want to be in an earthquake, away from things that are going to fall. And we talked about driving. And then after an earthquake, of course, our communications plan comes into play as well, making sure other folks know that we're okay, where we might be, being aware that we might have aftershocks and damage could continue to happen, and then being plugged into local monitoring sites like our alerts and things in the county or the city, so that we get the most up-to-date information, know what's safe. And just a quick for the home, of course, it's important to know how to shut off the gas and the water, the appliances, the heater. Water heater should be secured by 2 straps. That's kind of a requirement now. I don't know about most folks in Benicia. I doubt earthquake insurance, just because we're on bedrock. Probably one thing we may or may not need. Obviously that's personal, but the gas line is important. And we've certainly dealt with wildfires and have a lot of experience in that. But really that's just paying attention to what's going on, knowing where the fires may be, knowing where they're coming, making sure you're not adding to the problem of being in areas where fires are happening, and making sure you're aware and monitoring what's going on so that you're not part of the problem. So a couple enhancements to the list. The N95 masks. I think I don't know their availability now, but you really should have one. When we experience severe wildfires, our air quality gets so bad that the particulate matter is really high, so that the N95s become important to protect in that situation. You're muted. Judy, I didn't catch you because you're muted. Okay, I'm not, anyway, yeah, they have to be sealed. That looked like maybe what you were talking about, but they do have that bar across the nose, and that's so that they're sealed, and it needs to be a tight fit. But the N95s are really the only thing that protect from that ashes and particulate matter. So being in the Bay Area, it is important to have one. For COVID, we were able to use the surgical masks and a lot of other face protection, but it should be a part of your kit, because we've really experienced it so often. And especially if there's any kind of impairment for folks breathing, whether it's asthma or other things that may make breathing harder. So it's important to protect yourself. And as always in any emergency, it's just be prepared, which is be ready to evacuate. Benicia just put up those signs telling us what the evacuation routes are. I don't know if you've seen those blue signs coming around town, but they kind of indicate the way out. So just another thing, it's really, a lot of this is thinking ahead. Where would I go? What's the quickest access to the freeway or to out of town? Is my car, a lot of people make sure their cars are always at least half full so that you can get away and not worry about things like that. Having flashlights and flares and things like that, blankets. I know I often will change a seasonal car bag. In the summer, I tend to have a t-shirt and maybe a sweatshirt and some sandals. In the winter, I've got a beanie and gloves and something warm, if you ever get stuck out or your car breaks down or something, just a little more preparation. And wildfires. Most of us know this about 200 feet around your home, making sure that you're fire safe, and making sure that you have stored water stored, and you prepare your home as much as you can. Okay. And that is the presentation. Primarily, I just wanted to get you thinking about personalizing the kits that you have and maybe expanding on those kits to include, maybe one for home, one for your car, so that you have a good basis for getting started and you can build it out from there in terms of having this kit. So any questions or comments, or I don't know if you can either unmute or raise a hand, what I can see here.
Diane, do you want to stop sharing the screen?
Very good. Good call. Thank you